Finally, after months of silence, we now have some noise. Which in of itself is pretty nice, because we may now have a clue as to what Adrian Newey's been cooking over at Aston Martin and whether or not he thinks they're a lost cause or not. Just as I passed Aston Martin's factory on the way to the Silverstone Museum the other day, boom! They dropped a massive interview on their website. It looks incredibly long, almost too long did not read territory. But I'm not gonna lie, driving past Aston Martin's factory in the flesh was really, really cool. I mean, I could swear that I heard Papa Stroll's voice echoing through the breeze as it then carried itself over to the very empty Hijacked facility. I'm pretty sure Papa Stroll's voice is like birdsong to anyone who works in the area. Now, naturally, something that requires a sit down and a cup of tea to read through may not be, well, your cup of tea. So allow me to yap on about it for a while for your entertainment. And maybe for your trouble, you could drop a like on the video and maybe subscribe to the channel so you can get more of these interesting little fact-finding missions. Put simply, Adrian Newey is more than just your recent new hire, a big-name star or anything like that. No. He is their managing technical partner, meaning he is the guy to bring the team's technical division all the way forward and right up to the front-running pack. And you'll be pleased to know that despite him being 2 months or so behind everyone else when it comes to the 2026 regulation development cycle being lifted after it had been previously banned last year, he's managed to roll up his sleeves and get himself well and truly stuck in. He has found something to cook with after him being initially concerned that there wouldn't be anything. Yep, despite him being in his mid-60s, the guy still got it. Even after months last year where Christian Horner and anyone at Red Bull will be going, "Oh, well, Adrian, he wasn't all that was cracked up to be. I mean, using a pencil. I mean, that pencil won your championship. So quite frankly, I would trust that pencil. As we have seen, that pencil of his can get you places. And if you're not careful, where the sun don't shine." Now, even though there have been multiple reports saying that Newey does not attend any meetings whatsoever, he did join a concept meeting almost immediately when he walked into the factory, but he has been getting to know people, and as we will discuss in this video, people are very important in his book, so he wants to get to know every single person that is relevant to his duties. Now, okay, this is all very well and good, Law, but this is coming from Aston Martin's website. This is not an exclusive for an independent F1 publication or something like that. This is surely going to be some sort of propaganda to justify spending all of this money, $33 million a year, on this technical marvel of an engineering genius. And if you're not into the technical stuff, you're probably here because you want to know whether he's been spilling the tea regarding Red Bull or not, whether he's been throwing some shade in their direction. Well, I will get to that right now, but I hate to disappoint you. The best that it really gets is like some kind of subtle backhanded compliment, but you can dig deep and think that there are some shots fired, but they're very guarded. It's almost akin to saying something about someone and they go, "Oh, that's really sweet. Hey!" But he doesn't like drawing attention to himself through words alone, only his creations. The strongest thing in this interview that he said was that Red Bull's factory was an unremarkable industrial estate with one of the worst wind tunnels in F1, but he presents that as praise for the team, noting that they still excelled because everyone worked so well together, even though the facilities weren't really the best. It's not a bespoke unit like Aston Martin's is, even though it is very close to Silverstone Park, as I did see. I didn't realise it was that close. And if you want to put it that way, you could almost reflect his comments on Aston Martin as just the opposite way around, in that, the people, they are getting there, but they are very few in number. But the facilities with Aston Martin, oh, they're absolutely first rate. And I bet he's looking forward to playing with these brand new toys. This is effectively his brand new playground. He's gonna love it. Because yes, quite frankly, the results that Aston Martin are spewing out at the moment do not reflect the facilities whatsoever. It's up to him to try and get the best of both worlds. He did note that Red Bull's 2024 design may have been pushed too far by less experienced engineers, though he stressed it wasn't a criticism. But still, results show a team fixated on what makes Max fast. Classic tunnel vision. Pierre Vacher and his crew, who had basically taken over from Newey in terms of full-time development, could not let the concept go. Not before it was due to change in 2026, at least. That, and I personally think that they just couldn't admit that they'd gotten it wrong with the car, which is probably why you're hearing time and time again all of these protests regarding their rivals saying, "Oh, they're cheating, oh, there's something wrong with it." It's far cheaper and easier to complain about another team's car and potentially get it banned or hell or nerfed, rather than just try and come up with your own solution or having to copy somebody else, because that takes time and money, and with this cost cap and convergence, and next year, money is a bit scarce at the moment. And also, you're sensing that they are eventually conceding that, yeah, they've got to just give it a go with the brake concept, because they are reportedly going to be coming up with their own version. And arguably, you could think that all of their shouting, the squeaky wheel getting the grease after the FIA went into a really forensic level report on it, exposing the brake technology in its entirety, all of their secrets got exposed to everybody, so no one's going to be special. So Red Bull kind of got what they wanted anyway. So you could argue that the governing body threw Red Bull a bone here. It saved them so much work. And then he was asked as to why he left. He did, Newey, then say it was down to internal turmoil started by Christian Horner. It's just not his jam, really. He's not there for the drama. He's there to design cars. But he didn't say anything about the technical or cultural side of Red Bull. He has no beef with the main overview of the staff, nor their facilities, because he could make do with what he had. But here at Aston Martin, oh, he won't have to make do at all. But yeah, that's the best we really got, really, in terms of Red Bull. It's not scathing, and yeah, I didn't really expect it, honestly. I just thought I'd let you know. Because yes, Newey has praised the facilities and the team's overall ethos and work environment, but also notes growing pains, which is perfectly reasonable. It has been quite a big change for the team, going from very small cramped digs, the underdogs, to having a megabucks factory in the space of a couple of years, at the cutting edge even. It's going to take some time to grow into, yet he is keen to fully optimise the technical division as well as adding to their numbers. In this particular segment, it really sat well with me. I thought I'd share it with you. Ahem. F1 is about people. Yes, there is a lot of technology, but it's people who drive things forwards. A winning mentality is always a difficult one. If it's a team that hasn't had much success over the years, especially recently, then not winning becomes the norm. It's important to create the self-belief that we have the collective abilities to succeed. This is all part of trying to drive things forward. Now, I'm not a cheerleader, and I'm not like an American football coach who will stand up at the front of a room and give a rousing speech. It's about working with everybody and developing together. Quite right, really. His job is not meant to be a cheerleader. The best thing he can do right now, and something I've discovered trying to be the best that I can be, is that I don't need to be perfect. You just need to be present. Presence. He's there for everyone. To lead by example. Working side by side with each department instead of just locking himself away in the office and not really garnering the attention of anybody. Yeah, he will probably spend most of his time doing that, but there will come moments that he'll want to see all the new spangly toys in the wind tunnel. It would then require him talking to people, getting to know them, how to best work with them. And based on the initial impressions we have seen, there is that contagious enthusiasm knocking around. And when you combine that naturally with the team's very, very, very deep pockets, as well as all of that outside investment, I believe there's a little bit more Saudi money coming their way, then I don't think Aston Martin will have any problem attracting top-name talent because, well, Adrian Newey would be their line manager. And to get to work with such a storied designer, yeah, you're going to want that. Even though he might be a hard taskmaster, you'll be working under Newey. That's going to do your resume something great. The biggest thing that Newey has in terms of criticism for Aston Martin is that they simply don't have enough people to go around, that they're stretched really, really thin. They're having to make do with what they got. The current 2025 car is being run by a skeleton crew, effectively. Everyone's looking to next year, quite rightly so, which does explain in a way, despite their results being rather meagre compared to the other teams in the midfield, Aston Martin don't seem that bothered by it. And yeah, being understaffed, that can be easily fixed, especially if you get the job description down right. Well, okay, Law, what has exactly Newey been doing? Well, I think he's been working on two fronts. One big front, obviously, and one very, very small. He's barely involved with this year's car, offering, according to him, only the occasional lunchtime conversation with the remaining crew on it. No sketchbook lectures, just bite-sized wisdom between bites of lunch. Sure, that doesn't sound spectacular, but that might be enough. Because as we heard from Pierre Vacher a couple of years ago, Newey just occasionally coming into the office and casting his BDI on that project could easily save them time, weeks, I'm talking weeks here, not days or hours, of development time. It could save them going down a complete rabbit hole of development that is a hiding to nothing, which is something that Aston Martin really fell into last year at Imola. Apparently they've got some updates for this weekend at Imola. Oh dear. That kind of thing. Just saying, did you think of this? Or, well, that's no good. The point is that Adrian doesn't need to do much on this year's car because it's practically been developed already under the lead of Dan Fallows, who exited stage garbage chute. And I think it might be enough to at least stave off the likes of Sauber, and that maybe Aston Martin get a few more points come in their direction, at least try and figure in the battle for at least P6. He's also been listening carefully to the drivers. According to Newey, he has been talking extensively with the likes of Fernando and Lance, trying to find out what the strengths and weaknesses are with this current car, the overall structures of Aston Martin itself, the correlation with the simulator and the actual car. Remember last year, that being the buzzword, correlation, as to how Red Bull just simply didn't have any of it, and arguably still doesn't. Adrian's job, by talking to these two, is to try and really get down into the nitty-gritty when it comes to their honest opinions regarding driving this year's car, because I think it has been quite evident in years that drivers can be known to mask certain problems with the cars. That means it doesn't become exposed to their rivals, and therefore their rivals can exploit it, or maybe find some way to make the pain even more. Newey will be very skilled at doing that, and that the drivers will be saying, oh yeah, it's okay, and Adrian will be like, really? No, it's not. There you go. Isn't being honest better? And one thing I reckon sets Adrian apart from other technical directors is that he does race cars himself. Sure, it's more of an amateur capacity. You'll find him around various Monaco heritage races as well as Goodwood. He's even crashed a couple of cars in his time. But he knows how to race a car as well as design a race car in some capacity. Seeing a guy and a designer that kind of gets them, albeit not to a professional level of Formula One, hey, it's better than nothing. But make no mistake, next year is the big prize. That's what he's got his eyes on. He's concentrating on the big regulation change, as he said. Now, I'm pretty sure that everyone at the team, including Papa Stroll, would want this year's car to no longer be terrible. But the fact of the matter is, though, is that in the next couple of months, there will come a time, which Williams has already cried already, that they do have to cease all development on this year's car, and it will then descend into being simply a billboard for the sponsors, as well as being a mule car. That the AMR25 will just become a proof of concept to test out all the brand new facilities to make sure they're working in time for next year, which is exactly what Williams has been doing, and something you could describe that McLaren were doing last year with the MCL38 being partly developed in their brand new wind tunnel, and then the MCL39, this year's car, being fully developed in it. It was all up to speed, ready to go, and look at what McLaren are doing right now. Put simply, this car is becoming a calibration tool and nothing more. And according to Andy Cowell, the team principal, they are going to be partaking in a 3-race development program, which will start at the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix and carry through all the way through to the technical directive change at the Spanish Grand Prix. This triple header will decide whether or not it's worth continuing development on this car or just completely scrapping it and going full bore next year. And also, do pay attention to this team, because even though, like I've said, he is not focused on this year's car, there may be just that teensy bit of influence going on around here, which may save Aston Martin getting worse, or all the other teams leaping forward, and they just remain stationary. But don't expect a groundbreaking design that Adrian's going to showcase, because he will be seen around the Monaco Grand Prix with his sketchbook, according to him, and this might be the first official sighting of him wearing Aston Martin colours, so that's going to be pretty exciting too. And another thing you're probably wanting to know is what he really thinks of these brand new regulations coming in for 2026. Yeah, now that he's actually had some time to understand them properly and actually do some designing. Well, here you go. And it's not all doom and gloom, even though we could have seen history repeating itself. They're similar to what my thoughts were about the big regulation change of 2022. Initially thinking the regulations were so prescriptive that there wasn't much left here for a designer. But then you start to drill into the detail and realise there's more flexibility for innovation and different approaches than first meets the eye. We saw that at the start of 22, with teams taking really quite different directions. I think there's a high probability that in 26 we will see something similar to 22. There's enough flexibility in the regulations, and I'm sure people will come up with different solutions. For the first time I can remember, we've got both the chassis regulations and power unit regulations changing at the same time. This is interesting and slightly scary. Both the new aerodynamic rules and the power unit regulations present opportunities. Now that is very good in bringing up my next point, Honda arriving as their works partner. It could be a potential wild card, with Newey being quite optimistic and having deep respect for Honda's recent championship success. And as I mentioned yesterday, Honda's getting quite punchy. Their CEO Koji Watanabe already said Honda will voice its opinions on Aston Martin's driver lineup. And I know that many of you are going to be thinking, yeah, they're going to try and tell Papa Stroll to kick his boy out. No, that's not going to happen. Not at the beginning of their working together for real. No, what we will probably get is them being assertive, not adamant, that they'll broach the topic, they'll feel confident about it, but they're not going to be confronting Aston Martin about it. That's just not the way to go. That ain't it. But they will definitely not be nonchalant about it, because they're certainly a lot more confident than they were back a couple of years ago when they first penned the deal, when Honda vowed to stay out of the debate regarding drivers entirely. And considering the recent news that there has been wild speculation about Max Verstappen, the timing of Watanabe-san's quotes were very pertinent. After all, he would reunite with Honda and Newey, two ingredients which contributed toward all 4 of his titles. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to be getting bogged down in the rumour mill as to who said what actually, Aston Martin $300 million deal or anything like that. The official party line that right now that you've got Alonso and Stroll, they're locked in, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon, unless Fernando decides after next year, if it's not for him, that he would retire. And even then, he's going to remain with Aston Martin as some kind of brand ambassador hogging their cars, unless rumours to be believed and Flavio Briatore might bring him back in for a 4th go-around Enston. And in practice, Newey says that they are pursuing various avenues with next year's car and will have to prioritise wisely, which is quite good to know actually. However, every team is limited by the budget cap and staffing, especially Aston Martin. As I have said, they are lacking people. So therefore, concentrating resources on the directions it believes in will have to be pertinent and could easily pay off, because it's a really big tightrope at the moment. But if they do have this laser focus, instead of just doing a scattergun maneuver and just seeing and hoping if things stick or not, this might give them a little bit of an edge if they can find something early, really especially. And Newey also knows that there is an element of risk with all of this, because they might find something which initially turns out to be absolutely rubbish and not worth their time, but with a little bit more attention paid to it, it could turn out to be brilliant, a game changer, the innovation akin to the double diffusion of Brawn that could send them all the way up to the top, and then everything else is an absolute cakewalk. And indeed vice versa, something they develop which initially looks good, peaks really early, and then completely plateaus. That's where his experience comes in. He's famous for holistic car design thinking, that he believes just designing the car via a pencil means you get to understand the car more. You feel it almost. And I can get behind that actually, because I always think that when you write something down with a pen or a pencil on some paper, you tend to remember it more easily than if you just type something on a computer. It sticks with you for some reason. There's some sort of muscle memory. He also comments that he would ideally like to allow his engineers and aero team the freedom and time to come up with ideas, as it could be the team's winning innovation. Step back and let them thrive with a somewhat passive oversight. But there is something in this document where he does say that he simply cannot do that because they are pressed for time, that there will come a time when he does have to step in and hold their hand and make sure they don't go down a completely nonsensical route. Something that Aston Martin, as I've said, have been very susceptible to in the last couple of years. And really they'll have no choice, because that aerodynamic team, as he said, is really undersized. But hey, at least it sounds like they're onto something. Now okay, you sat through all the technical stuff, and it inevitably raises a big question. What about the drivers? Again, we won't get into the Verstappen rumours, we're discussing Fernando and Lance here, but maybe we'll mention Max briefly regarding the context of the drivers. And on paper, the lineup that Newey has got is fairly constant. This is their 3rd season together, there's plenty of data behind them, the wind tunnel, the designers, they fully understand what it takes for these drivers, and therefore there's plenty of information to pass through and then bring forth into the next season together. And yes, it would have been quite interesting to bring Max into the play, but he would be a brand new entity with no real evidence behind it. The data wouldn't be there. There'd only be anecdotal recollections from Newey, and those are pretty insightful, but they are still kind of limited to the gigabytes of information that Aston Martin would already have on Fernando and Lance. And right now, in the first year of this regulation cycle, you need as much stability and continuity as you get. That will be one thing that Adrian still remembers well from Christian. For his part, Fernando isn't worried about any hypothetical poaching at all. He notes that he has a firm contract and even plans to stay with the team beyond his F1 days. And he considers the Verstappen gossip very good, because it shows the high-profile interest in Aston Martin as a project in of itself. And when asked if he'd welcome Verstappen as a teammate, he said he would, but that it would be very unlikely to happen anyway. And as for Lance Stroll, naturally, and in some circles, maddeningly so, it's a bit more complicated. Yes, we all know that he is the boss's son, a super wealthy boss. But there is also the reality to consider here, is that in 2025, 6 races in, he is still the only scoring Aston Martin driver with 14 points to his name. It's not just a solitary 2 or something like that, pity points. These are real, meaningful points that Lance has earned. And I know that you're going to say that Fernando has had a lot of bad luck, and you'd be absolutely right. Because in Miami, he was, according to him, fighting the likes of Hamilton for P3 in the sprint, and that would have been a good clutch of points for Aston Martin. But unfortunately, due to a mismanagement regarding pitting in for the slick tyres, it meant that he was fighting Lawson, and then Lawson binned him into the barrier, which meant that once again, he would score no points. And then the race turned out to be a disaster for both of them. They were propping up the order. Fernando had also been denied in Australia due to the abhorrent weather conditions, and then a brake failure in China meant that he couldn't score anything. It's just been one thing after another for Fernando. That is something important to remember, but again, in the eyes of the investors, Lance is the one doing the business. And that still sounds weird. And it's really weird because historically, Lance has always trailed his teammates, be it Alonso in the past, Perez, Vettel. It's been one thing after another. The only teammate that he has actually beaten in terms of points is Sergei Sirotkin at Williams, 6 points to 1 in 2018. Does this mean, as race fans have reported, that Fernando Alonso is becoming the next Sergei Sirotkin? I mean, it's a bit too early to say. But to be fair, we do have to give Lance some credit here. I know it's painful to say this, but he is on good form. He seems to be in really good place at the moment. He's got a brand new race engineer, Gary Gannon, who I recollect being an absolute godsend for Mick Schumacher over to Haas, and the relationship seems to be getting on quite well. He has been getting all of these points, which has certainly boosted his motivation. His fitness seems to be better than ever. He's finally gotten over the bike injury he had in 2023. He's now got, I think, a full fitness program, so he's in the best shape he can possibly be, and in terms of chronological age, he is at his prime. And also, you probably get the sense from him that the team is going in the right direction, so that surely would bolster him up entirely, that maybe next year will be better than this one, that there is some hope for the future. And also, let's be real here, being near the back has far less pressure attached to it, because there's a bit more privacy, because no one cares. No one cares about what Aston Martin is doing right now, because they're going, oh, they're a bit rubbish, aren't they? Oh, well, I want to see Charles versus Lewis, or McLaren cheating again, or Max's downfall. There are so many more compelling headlines at the moment. And as far as Lance is concerned, that's fine by him. Okay, let's wrap. Newey didn't join Aston Martin for a quick fix or a quick buck. He's focused on next year's reset, reshaping the grid. His day job, chatting over lunch, testing tools, sketching future concepts. The regs may look rigid, but Newey has spotted some loopholes, and that already is quite spicy. But he does recognise that this is no Toyota, that you can't just rely on the fancy kit to get the results, that what you need right now is the right people. And right now, he has been trying to make do with what he has by trying to streamline the entire operation, making what he already has in terms of staff, personnel, and facilities all the more efficient. And that is pretty good going in the first couple of months. And that Honda deal, it's more than just a badge change. This is a bit more synergy coming his way, because in terms of a design, Adrian Newey gets Honda and Honda gets him. It's a real collaboration here, people. Alonso and Stroll, they're contracted through next year and management publicly backs them. But Honda has declared interest in having a voice, keeping the door ajar for a star signing if performance stalls. And Newey's own verdict is understated, yet telling. That if we do our work correctly, then hopefully things will come together. Yeah, that may sound like cautious language, but it is optimistically cautious language. He's not being completely ahead of himself or getting stubborn or pompous. With the right tools, he can produce a winning car because, well, he was able to produce a winning car with, you know, that unassuming estate in the middle of Milton Keynes and one of the worst wind tunnels in Formula One. Imagine what he can do with one of the best wind tunnels in Formula One and a factory that has barely had any scuff marks on the paving. So, in short, yeah, he does sense some hope here, that there is something going for this team. That he can easily help just provide some groundwork for this year in terms of their facilities, maybe make sure the car doesn't end up being terrible and that it doesn't go completely off the tangents again, and that next year it'll be starting off on a good note. So in a way, this is kind of like what Williams are doing at the moment, albeit with much bigger sums of money and Saudi investment behind them. Meanwhile, FIA's politics, they rumble on. A leaked report recently from the BBC suggests that the president is about to tighten election rules, possibly to block rivals like Carlos Sainz Sr. To find out why the rally legend is seriously going to be considering running for office and how popular this has been amongst many punters, watch this video next, straight after this one.